Welcome to the Book Party Podcast.
Join us as we journey into the world of books with Michael T.
Prepare to be captivated by engaging interviews, insightful discussions, and fascinating stories. You'll discover new adventures and gain insight into the creative process of the authors themselves as they share their struggles and accomplishments. Now let's hear from Michael T.
This is Michael T. Welcome to the Book Party Podcast, where we explore the minds and expertise through thought readers from various fields. Today, we have a distinguished guest who is an accomplished author and a seasoned events and risk management expert. Joining us is Richard John, the Chief Operating Officer of Realize Me Ltd. Or Limited, a prominent events services agency based in the UK with a global reach. Richard co-founded Realize in 2017, and since then, the company has evolved into a multifaceted organization offering events training, consultancy, event intelligence, and even servicing as a boutique investment and advisory agency. Richard is no stranger to the stage, as he's a sought-after speaker at industry events worldwide. He also mentors startups in the sponsorship and events industry, lending his extensive knowledge to nurturing emerging talent. But that's not all. Richard is also a prolific author with a portfolio spanning 4 books and effective communication through events, 2 novels, and a collection of ebooks. His latest offering, Risk It, How to Run Great Events and Live with the Risk, is a practical guide that unveils the intricacies of event risk management in a conversational and approachable style. Richard shares invaluable insights on identifying and managing risks in the world of events, making it accessible to everyone, regardless of their experience level. With this book, you'll be well equipped to ensure successful events and contribute to your business growth. So, whether you're an events professional looking to enhance your risk management skills or simply interested in fascinating world of events, stay tuned for a treat as we delve into the pages of Risk It and explore the mind of the author, Richard John. So, Richard, take it from here, fill in the blanks a bit, and tell our listeners about yourself.
Michael, thank you very much for inviting me. And I have to say, when you started using words like distinguished, I was busy looking around the room to see who else had walked in. You've done a very generous summary, so thank you very much for that. And probably it would help if I just mentioned to your readers that I've been around for a few years. When I was young, I was always a bit of a frustrated author. I used to enjoy writing novels that were the kind of English versions of the Hardy Boys when I was in my early teens. And I always used to enjoy writing. It's just that somehow, like many people of my generation, I fell into the world of event management, which is a huge amount of fun, going around the world, putting on business events, conferences, and that kind of thing. And as you rightly say, now I run a company called Realize, and we're quite a big company that people don't really know about, because if you go to an event, often the first thing that happens is you get your badge because you've registered. And we're the people behind the scenes who make all that happen. And I think one of the things is events can be jolly exciting things to go to, but sometimes I can be at an event and the topic is something I completely don't understand, because I'm there just to make sure the technology doesn't fall over. So in my spare time, in the past, you would have found me scribbling my ideas down onto a pad. And now more regularly, I'm there tapping away on my iPad for ideas for both a range of fiction and non-fiction books. So for me, and we can explore this in a bit more detail, I find that the writing is great for me to be creative when life can be a bit boring. It's a great business tool, and it's also a great way for me to relax.
That sounds fantastic. On your publishing journey, because you've done a lot of writing and, throughout the years, did you do the self-publishing route, or did you go find an agent and an agency route, or something in between, like a hybrid route? What does your publishing journey path take you?
Well, when I finally got round to writing my first novel, which was it was a spy thriller set at the kind of the end of the 90s, and you may remember in history the IRA finally agreed a ceasefire with the British government, and I came up with this idea for a thriller in which there were various nefarious groups trying to sabotage the peace agreement. And I wrote the book, and I remember sitting down. And I was completely captivated writing this book, and I probably didn't follow the rules of write 3 chapters, send it off to an agent, or anything like that. I just wrote and wrote and wrote until I had a finished novel, and then I started sending it round to agents to see if they would be interested. And there were a few agents, this is very much the traditional route, there were a few agents who said, this has potential, keep working on it. And there was one agent in particular who just kept saying, I like this, tidy it up here, because I hadn't gone the route of finding an editor. I just did it all myself. And he actually touted the book around all the publishers and was getting various bites of interest. And then I'm ashamed to say that what happened was the interest kind of wore off on this idea of terrorists doing kind of minor atrocities, because suddenly we had the real huge global atrocity of 9/11. And suddenly the world had changed so much that any interest in this book disappeared completely. And of course, it was a very minor and not relevant casualty from that point of view. And so the book just languished kind of under my desk for about 5 years, when I then had new neighbours move in. We'd moved into the kind of the mid-noughties. And when we got chatting, they said, well, why don't you self-publish it? And I had heard about what was traditionally known as vanity publishing and never been tempted. But this idea of self-publishing seemed like a great idea. So I did precisely that. They helped me set it up, and it was up there on Amazon. And I told all my friends, some of whom were foolish enough to go and buy a copy. But it didn't generate huge riches. There was no rushing out to buy the Aston Martin. But it was the kind of, my first stage of, I've tried the traditional route, nearly got there. Now I'm here going the sort of self-publishing route.
Self-publishing has come a long, long way now from when it started. It's relatively easy now to do self-publishing. Amazon gives you the tools to do it. There's some other places that give you the tools to do it. You can upload into KDP and you're published, once you follow some rules. But, you obviously need, to collaborate a little bit, like when I did with my books, because I needed, some help with the editing and formatting and stuff like that. I didn't know how to do formatting. I needed another set of eyes on it. So to do the editing, I didn't want to do that myself. And to do a cover, I tried to do a cover on my first one. What a disaster. So I found somebody to do the cover, and 1,000% better. And in this industry, when they say, in the real world, they say you can't judge a book by its cover. But in this industry, you do judge a book by its cover. If the cover looks god-awful, nobody's going to read the book. There has to be at least some interest in the cover itself. So, so that's what I did. And I went, I've published 3 now. I'm working on the 4th in the series, and they're nonfiction. So I'm going to get done with this 4th one. I don't know where I'm going to go from that. So take us to a point where you would consider to be your worst author moment.
Well, I do actually have one, and I hope this won't get us taken off air, because, often people will say you should write it. Well, sometimes say write about what you know. And I'm not sure, for your readers, I hope this helps, I'm not sure whether that's actually true. I think you should write about things that just kind of stir you up a bit. So when I wrote my first novel, The Thriller, I spent a huge amount of time doing lots and lots of research. I put the book together, and I was quite proud of myself. I think probably the lesson I would share with people is I tried to be very, very clever about showing how much research I'd done into the workings of the security services. And actually, it just made it sound a bit like an encyclopedia. So, of course, there's all this thought about do your research, but then don't show it all to your readers. But then, and it was just about it was a kind of story. It was various bits that dropped into my head, and I thought I can kind of connect the dots and have a story here. So even though I've written this novel that is about, there is a guy who works for MI5. Believe me, I have never worked for MI5. I don't know anyone who works for MI5, and this is just made up. The reason I tell you that, Michael, is because my second novel is set in the London adult film industry, where someone is choosing to murder people in front and behind the cameras. And what's happened is the book does contain some quite graphic sex scenes. And I've had to kind of justify this to people. And people who read it say, it's a great read, but you've got sex scenes in it. And I said, well, if you think about a really great film like Saving Private Ryan, that is an awesome film and it's very anti-war. But the start of Saving Private Ryan leaves you completely kind of distraught because it brought home the realities of what it was like on D-Day. And I said, so if you're going to write a book that talks about the adult industry, you're a bit naive if you then pretend it doesn't exist. And I had people saying, well, what if your mother reads this book? And it was like, well, I don't think it's really her genre. And I think, you put the kind of blurb on the back of the book about what the plot is about. So if someone's very kind of sensitive about the issue, don't read the book. It's a bit like someone, going in to see, a horror movie and then being upset when they get scared. So I think for me, the kind of painful part, the worst part, was having written this book that I was quite proud of and having had some of my friends who read it and said, this is a very, very clever book, but then having to justify the topic as though I was some kind of pervert. And that was really quite hard.
Yeah, well, I was told you write about what you know or write about what you're experienced in or write about at least something you're interested in. Okay, so if you don't have an interest in it whatsoever, you shouldn't be writing about it. So at least something you're interested in because it helps you do the research. It helps you, do things like that because then you have more of a, your heart into the book because you have an interest in that topic or that genre or something like that. So, those are the three ways I kind of look at it, so at least have an interest in it or have some experience in it. Or, if you're an expert in it, it's something you really know, I guess you can write about that. My books are all about parenting and I'm no expert at it. And I hate that word expert. To me, expert is a used drip. It's an expert. It's a used drip anyway. I've raised 4 kids all the way through teenagers into college and all of that. So I have experience in it, a lot of experience, the ups and downs and everything else. And so, that's the kind of thing I've written books about. And so I have the experience in it, but I'm no expert. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything like that. And those people tend to talk above your head anyway, But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's go to what we call an epiphany moment. At least I call it that, where you're doing anything except the writing. And let's go back to the book you just wrote. Anything except the writing. You could be driving, you could be cooking, you can be taking a shower, you can be, wake up from asleep or going to bed. And all of a sudden, this bright light goes off, bang, in your head. Man, I got to get a pen and paper. I got to write this down right now. This has to go in my book. You ever have an epiphany like that?
I do. And, I have to tell you, Michael, I am at the moment working on my third novel. And when I have time, I'm feeling quite inspired by it. And it is it's exactly as you describe. And I think it goes back to the point, when you said, what drives you to write a book? And it can just be things you're interested in. And sometimes it's just a number of pieces all kind of dropping into place. And this book, once again, is going to be completely different because here am I in my 60s and I've decided I'm going to write what I think is generally called chick lit. And it's going to be about a guy who's much younger than me, who's going to suffer heartbreak and then come out the other end quite happily. But it was motivated by a number of little pieces. One was an article I read about we have this concern in the UK about people using things like tracking devices to find out what their partner is up to, completely illegally. And it occurred to me, well, what happens if that was to happen to someone by accident? And I thought, well, is that likely to happen by accident? And one of the things, because I travel a lot, I have my faithful bag that is stuffed full of essential computers that I need for work. And it's got an air tag on it, so I can never be separated. And I thought, well, imagine if our hero has that, and then suddenly someone borrows his bag, but they don't go where they're supposed to go. And that's the start of the story. And then I was looking for a kind of, well, where might this happen? And my partner took me away just by surprise for a weekend in Corsica. And we went to a little town called Ajaccio in Corsica that is famous for absolutely nothing, except it's where Napoleon was born. And we had 6 days lying on the beach and 1 day of a little bit of culture. And we popped into Napoleon's birthplace. And all of a sudden I thought, I think I can weave this theme in to this kind of breakup novel. And all of a sudden, my partner and I, we're walking through Ajaccio, and I thought all the bits are sort of dropping into place. And we stopped for a coffee and an ice cream. And suddenly she said, why are you on your phone? And it's because I've got an app and I'm busy making notes. So it is precisely as you described. Suddenly the bits all start to drop into place. And I would urge your readers, when that happens, just start making notes. And you might be frightened by the gaps, the bits you don't know, and you're not sure where it's going to go, but just go with it. At the moment, I've got my sort of first third of this next novel and the last third, and there's this big chunk in the middle, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I can tell you, I'm no longer worried about that because something will happen.
Yeah. So let's turn our attention to today. What is the one thing that you're the most fired up about, most excited about right now, today?
Oh gosh, there are so many things because I really enjoy my life, and I think one of the things is at the moment I'm fired up by the fact that the end of January for a month I'm actually setting aside work and I'm going off to an island off the coast of Thailand, and my partner, who's very good, knows that a lot of the time I will simply be tapping away on the computer because I think it's important, and I just know this, that one of the reasons for going there is because there'll be a 12-hour time difference. So work won't be able to contact me. They can send messages, but we won't be talking on a regular basis. And I know that sense of being in the flow is going to come. And I've got several ideas for sort of both sort of books and ebooks, fiction and non-fiction. And I've just got a sense that they're kind of bubbling away. And I've got to sit there probably with the water lapping around my feet, and it's all going to come. And there's part of me that thinks it may not. Do you know what? I think it will. But if it doesn't matter that much. And I think sometimes you just have to not be afraid. Not be afraid. Just go for it.
This is Michael T. I invite you to go to thebookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey. You can download and follow us there. Please leave a review. Please don't forget to sign up for our weekly video newsletter to get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Richard, we're going to go into the lightning round. This is a little bit different. What the lightning round is we have 4 pointed questions for 4 pointed answers. So before you started writing, before you ever became an author, what stopped you from becoming an author in the first place?
In truth, Michael, I never thought I was good enough. I would see other people's books on the shelves and think, I wish I could do that. I kind of remembered how much I'd enjoyed it. And I had that sensation of, I'm not good enough.
That's probably 90% of the answers we get is people thinking they're not good enough because they see all these authors out there with all these novels and books. And once they realize they're not writing for them and they're not writing to their avatar, you're writing for yourself, you're writing to your own avatar, your only competition is you. So you just need to write. Anyway, okay, once you started writing, what was the best advice you had ever received?
Well, I think that what actually happened was someone said to me, you are already a writer, when I'd said about being a frustrated author. And I just looked at them and they said, but you're writing short articles for magazines, but you're also running workshops and you're writing a huge amount of notes. You're emptying your brain down onto documents and then giving them to your delegates. So in fact, they actually said to me, how dare you say you're not a writer? And I suddenly thought, oh yeah, I am, aren't I? And I think there's so many of your readers will be saying something similar. I wish I was an author. And the truth is they are already an author. They may be journaling. They may be writing a blog post. They might be writing letters to people. They are already authors. So, you don't need to wait for that official stamp. You're doing it already. So forget with the fear.
That is correct. Share one of your habits that contributes to your success.
Well, one of the things I still do is write for 2 business magazines, and they're always happy to take any columns that I do, which are normally about 600 words. So what I have is a document that I have on my phone, my iPad, and my Mac. And it's a document where I just drop snippets. And those snippets can be quotes that I like. It can be little news headlines. It can be a statistic. And I drop them in. And I probably got about 100 pages almost. I put each one on a separate page. And then when I'm on a train, on a plane, I open that document and I just have a look and I see which one I want to write a bit more about. Because I think I've only got 600 words to write. The editor will phone me. They'll happily take any topic as long as it's kind of related to my sector. And I've always got several on the go. So when people are concerned about writer's block or, well, what should I write about? The answer is if you have a document like that, you've always got something that's going to kickstart you and the rest will come.
Okay. Could you share with our listeners an internet resource that you use when you write?
Well, one of the things I actually wrote during the COVID lockdown was a book called Dent in the Sofa. And it was based on the idea that we were all stuck at home. We're in lockdown. We were all referring to these lovely streaming platforms. And I was interested to see what they did to keep us entertained, which I could then apply to my world of meetings and events. So one of the platforms that I use for inspiration, believe it or not, is Netflix and Amazon Prime. I'm going to tell you both of them because what I do, and actually Apple TV, gosh, there's loads, because what I do is I just have a look at the most popular or what's available, and it actually stirs me and spurs me to think, firstly, look how they're summarizing something. Look how they're explaining it. Look at how they're trying to engage us. Look at the kind of the way that an idea that you might think is quite strange is being pitched to the audience. And for me, that really inspires me. That's a great way of having a look and thinking, what do people want? And then sometimes, what do people not even realize that they want? So going to those platforms is actually quite inspirational just to see what people want.
Yeah, one of the resources that I use is a thesaurus. I have to have a thesaurus because there's only so many ways you can say something. and you got to be changing it to make it say something else to keep it interesting and not just be so repetitive, you know. So the thesaurus is just a fantastic resource for me. So, Richard, we're going to now go into the grand finale. So what I'd like you to do is take your time and tell our listeners all about your book.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm going to tell the listeners, if I may, about it's like the trio of books. So one is called Risk It, which is just about how to organize events and then manage the risk. And one of the things I would say is that sometimes I run workshops around this, and you'd think it can be quite a dull topic. But what I often say to people is that people often like to hear about what goes wrong. It's fine to hear about what goes right, but we're much more interested in what goes wrong. If you were recruiting someone, it's much better if someone tells you what they learned from the things that went very badly. And you may have a similar thing in the States. There's a program that runs on British television called It'll Be All Right on the Night, which effectively is a collection of bloopers, things going wrong on set. And it's a hugely popular program. And in the day, some of your readers may remember, and your listeners will remember, we used to have something called DVDs. And you'd buy a DVD and there'd be a whole chunk of outtakes. And the point about this is we like the things that go wrong. So Risk It, which is quite a specialized book for people organizing events, is often about what goes wrong. Now, some of those things can be a bit tragic because there have been cases where people have been killed at events because people don't follow the rules. And this is often upsetting, but sometimes it's full of stories about things that are actually quite entertaining. We had many cases of, in fact, there was one from the States during COVID that was very, very went absolutely viral, of a lawyer who turned up for a Zoom meeting, but his kids had been already playing with the Zoom setting, so the lawyer appeared as a kitten. You may remember this, and the judge is looking at this kitten that's an animated kitten, and the lawyer's saying, "I'm not a cat." And of course, these are the things that go wrong at events, but people love them. And we often learn a lot more from failure than from success. So, that's really what Risk It is about. And although it's quite a specialist book, I would encourage your readers to think about writing about things from a slightly different point of view and thinking about, we learn from what goes wrong. And just as an example, one of the other books I'm working on was motivated by a series of books, and I'm struggling to remember the author's name. I know her first name was Imogen. She wrote a book called Airline Babylon, and she wrote a book called Hotel Babylon, which became a TV series. And effectively, she went off to people working in those sectors and said, "Tell me the stories of what goes wrong." And that's the kind of thing I'm also looking at, because my life in events has been full of awesome stories where things go wrong. So I'm going to be writing a lot more about those. And again, as a kind of motivation to your listeners, the first two non-fiction books I wrote were effectively a collection of the pieces I'd written for business magazines. And they were different aspects about conferences and exhibitions. And I wrote them in a way that people would recognize them, because even if you don't know about the technicalities of organizing events, I bet you've been to one. I bet you've been to a conference, you've been to an exhibition, you've been to a festival, you've been to a congress. So when people start to read these books, and they can think, "Oh yeah, I recognize that, and I remember the speakers doing this," and they'll relate to that kind of thing. So I think sometimes people will think my sector is a bit specialist, and my answer is, don't you believe it? Because people will, if you explain it, people will have a sense. People often know more about your sector than you actually realize.
Exactly. Okay, Richard. Well, we thank you so much for being here with us today, opening up to us, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate this too. Richard John's books, Risk It, How to Run Great Events and Live with the Risk, is available on Amazon. Again, this is Michael T. To all our listeners, I would invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, scroll down to the icon of your choice where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms. such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey, where you can download and follow us there. Please leave a review. Don't forget to sign up for our weekly video newsletter and get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Until next time, keep reading, learning, and discovering the world through the pages of a good book. Book Party Podcast is owned and powered by MTM Legacy Publishing, LLC. This is Michael T. signing off.
You must not miss our next episode as we delve into a world of inspiration, entertainment, and thought-provoking insights. Join Michael T. on the next Book Party podcast and experience a new adventure, a new story, and a complete immersion into the world of Pages Unveiled, Chronicles of the Writing Journey.